She just doesn't have a face because that's the style. Art Deco. Think of the Academy Award. He doesn't have a face. She doesn't have a face. Same idea. You've seen that building in Batman as Wayne Enterprises. Also, WCIU was in that building, and America's favorite dance party, Soul Train, originally came from that building. If you bring your eyes down here, there's a mural called the Native American Lost in Chicago Daydreaming. That area is called Printers Row. Now, that's where we used to make these things called catalogs. If you're old like me, you would get these phone books in the mail from Sears, Spiegel, or Montgomery Ward. Think Amazon, but in a book. And they would be printed there, but distributed across the river here at this post office, which was built for the sole purpose of distributing those catalogs. All railroads point to Chicago in the United States for two reasons: meat and mail. Boom, that's your mail. If you look right there, it's also an Art Deco building. It's about 2.4 million square feet. It's by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. Look at the Congress Parkway. It literally runs through the center of that building. So to give you an idea of how good our city planners were, they left a space in that building for this freeway 20 years before there was this freeway. Now, the building itself, it's just gotten a $600 million reboot. It's done by the same people who did Freedom Plaza in New York. You can see they're actually working on building a dock right here for boats to pull up, for people to use. It has a 3.5 acre runnable track on the roof. If the building looks familiar, that's because it was in Batman. If you remember the beginning of Batman, one of the Joker's henchmen fires the grappling hook into what you thought was a bank. Actually, it was just the old post office. Remember when they run the school bus into the lobby? That's the lobby. So we're going to style shift now. We're going to go to what's called Gateway number 4. Gateway number 4 is by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. It is called postmodernism. So postmodernism comes after modernism. The building itself is what we call something called contextualism. So within the context of what's around it, the green of the glass matches the green of the river. The bend of the building matches the bend of the river. On top of it, there's a small circular structure that is to be a wheelhouse. What's a wheelhouse? That's a wheelhouse. When the captain drives the boat, it's got a wheel, right? So this is to be a boat on a river. Contextualism. Next door to that is Gateway number 3. This is the ugliest building in Chicago. I make fun of it. Somebody said to me the last ride, "You made fun of a building." I'm like, it doesn't have feelings. It's okay. It's just the building. The style internationalism really is just modernism. It came to the U.S. in the 1920s. We didn't know what to call it, so we're like, it's from Europe, but it's international. So that's what we did. What was there before it, though, was a beautiful building that was the second building of Union Station, our version of like the New York train station. We wanted something just as beautiful, so we thought 2 buildings. It was the last building built by Daniel Burnham. Started in 1910, finished in 1926. So if you walk into that building, which I invite you to do, there's a beautiful ramp that says "To all trains," because rail travel back then was very romantic and expensive. So they wanted you to open up to this beautiful European, see there's the part of Union Station. Beautiful, beautiful building. They tore it down, sadly. We're gonna go next door to that. We're gonna go to gateways number 1 and gateways number 2. People will randomly wave at the boat. Now, you don't have to wave back unless it's children. If kids wave at the boat, it's marine law. Okay, so let's go here. Gateways number 1, gateways number 2. So these are going to be more traditional black box style buildings, also known as Misesian style. Mies van der Rohe, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Some people call him the father of modernism. Don't do that. It's Louis Sullivan is the father of modernism. So you can see that the Bruce Graham, the architect here, though, exposes the train tracks by design. He said, "Hey, Chicago, you're still the pumping industrial heart of the Middle West." And boom, that's what he does. But the black box is more of like, comes from something, a concept called camera obscura. If you remember the old black box cameras, that's the same idea here. Let's come across the river to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. This is in a style called Eco Deco that was popular in the 1990s. Look at the two towers here and this space in between it. It's by Fukurama Johnson. So, Eco, look next door, you're going to see two towers in space. Eco Deco. So it echoes and mirrors the building actually next door to it. We'll talk about that building a little bit later on. But he put as many corner offices in the building as possible. Because back then, if you had a corner office, you were an important person. So he put as many of those in the building as possible. Coming up, last not a little bit. So we're going to go over here on the right-hand side. We're going to go to the Civic Opera Building. Now, the Civic Opera Building is built in 1929, right before the stock market crashed. In fact, it opens the night before. This building is also called Insel's Throne because Samuel Insel, who financed it, some people said it looks like a giant chair, that he built it for his wife, who is an opera singer. Darling, I love you, I build you a throne. Actually, she was not an opera singer, she was a cabaret performer, and a terrible one. The only reason it looks like a giant chair is it has what's called a setback. So buildings that were built too close together had setbacks to let the sunlight through to the streets below it. So that's the only reason why it looks like a big old chair. So look at that white trellis here on the left-hand side that it pointed to. So all of the horizontal weight of this building is absorbed in that steel and is absorbed into the horizontal part of the building. So we're going to get into a little engineering now. So when you build a building, you have to sink what are called caissons. Those are like stakes that go into the ground. This building, actually below it, has no caissons. It's like a magic trick. Because below it, they had no area or room to sink the caissons. So what they did was, they created that trellis system that was innovation. Innovation is also a word that you hear a lot of in American business, which comes from Chicago. So in World War I, after World War I, there was something called the Bauhaus movement. That's when people like Mies van der Rohe became to America to revolutionize architecture and what's called design. So if you think about Eames furniture, things of that nature, there was also something called the New Bauhaus with a guy by the name of Lalo Mahaly. Lalo Mahaly created the New Bauhaus, and today that's something called the Illinois School of Design. Hence, innovation. Over here, friends, on the right-hand side of the boat, this red brick building in 1850, there was a white wooden structure here. On that structure was a site called the Wigwam. In the Wigwam in 1850, not at a cold night like today, it was a hot August night, a young fellow by the name of Abraham Lincoln stepped up to a rostrum to utter the following words. I humbly accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States. Abe Lincoln nominated on this site to be our president. Today, it's a ball. That drowned it out. This is a low bridge. Low bridge. If you're on the staircase, please watch your head. I often think if I'm not paying attention, I will become Chicago's first headless tour guide. Certainly Chicago's most senseless tour guide. We're going out to Navy Pier. Okay. Woo! Hello. So this is our brand new Riverwalk. The area that we're on right now is also called Wolf Point. Wolf Point is all three rivers, the Illinois, Chicago, and Des Plaines River, coming together. The building over here on the left-hand side, that of course is the lovely Nuveen building, or 33 Wacker. It's also by Cohn Pedersen Fox. Below that, Lower Wacker Drive, where some of the greatest chase scenes cinematically have been filmed, for of course the Transformers, Batman, and the greatest movie God ever made, of course, the Blues Brothers. If you haven't seen it, we want to see Chicago properly, please watch the Blues Brothers. Over here on the left-hand side, of course, you have the Merchandise Mart. The Merchandise Mart at one point was the largest building in the world. It is 4.5 million square feet. So I showed you the old post office, that's 2.4, which looks twice as big, and yet that looks twice as small. Like the doctor's TARDIS, it's bigger on the inside. Sorry, I'm a nerd, I can't help it. So this building has 4.5 million square feet, and the building itself has 8.5 miles of hallways, 7.5 miles of plumbing. The building itself was the only building in Chicago history to have its own police station, fire station, zip code, and dedicated train platform. Built for $31 million, it was sold at a fire sale for $6 to the Kennedy family, which sold it later in the 90s for $450 million. Pretty good flip. So the Riverwalk here goes from Lake Street all the way down to Lake Michigan. Now you can see that gentleman, he's fishing right there. On the last ride, he pulled out like a 50-pound carp, and I'm sure it was fine, it only had 3 heads. But we've cleaned up the river quite a bit. In 1972, under the Nixon administration's Clean Water Act, we only had 11 species of fish in the river. Today we've got 72, so we're doing something right. Each one of these is called a story or a room. Beneath those silver pylons are cages. That's where the fish breed. Those are fish hotels. So again, the water itself is to be swimmable by the year 2030. I will not be doing that. If you're looking for a beautiful photo of Chicago, there's a really good one. So all the different styles of architecture that we're going to talk about today are in that frame. Modernism, postmodernism, Art Deco, Eco Deco, all the good stuff. These bridges that we're seeing, we've got 3 different styles of bridges in Chicago. Lift bridges, swing bridges, and these are called double-leaf bascule trunnion bridges. That means a family of teeter-totters. Over here on the right-hand side, there is what's called the River Theater. The River Theater's theme is inclusion. That's on display with that wheelchair-style graded, where those folks are taking their baby down. So that's for wheelchairs as well. That comes from the ADA. That's the Americans with Disabilities Act, bless you, signed into law George Bush 1941. We've seen a lot of things down here, bands, floating museums, concerts. My personal favorite was watching a couple get married. They actually pulled up on their boat, they used that as their church, but they had to be quick because the cops came. So, no love, Father, no love. And of course, as we come underneath the bridge here, we're gonna go over to the right-hand side of the boat. We're gonna see a building that we call the Danny DeVito building. Why? Because it's short, squatty, and angry. So, but it's heavy concrete. The style is called brutalism. It comes to us from Eastern Europe, and the idea is this designer here, his architect's name was Otto Stark. Kind of a perfect name for a brutalist architect. People ask you, these people are having a drink, having a good time. Sometimes the river floods, so it actually goes up to where those tables are sometimes, rises really quickly. So how do we take care of that? We created this thing, the city created something called the Great Tunnel Project. So there's a giant tunnel that runs underneath the city, all the way down into around Joliet. And it vomits all of the extra water so we can artificially lower the river. If you look at the building right there that has the gold filigree on top of it, and it's green, that's called the Union Carbon and Carbide Building. That was originally a Union headquarters. Today it is a hotel called the Pembry. Now people have said, is it to be the American Radiator Building in New York? Yes and no. Also, it is to look like a champagne bottle. For a long time, we didn't know which was which, but now we actually have a quote from one of the Burnham brothers saying, hey, make it look like a champagne bottle. So there's confirmation. As we come underneath the bridge, let's go on the right-hand side to a building that was the tallest building in the world for about 3 minutes. That happens to be what's called the Mather Tower. She was originally going to have a twin sister across the river. We all know that twinning is winning, but they didn't have enough money during the Depression to build it. So as we talked about before, times of boom and times of bust. Around that time, Chicago was spending about $3 million a year to build the city. The Depression happened and that figure collapsed down to about $100,000 a year. So that's a huge absorption, which means people weren't building for a long time. The Trump International, that of course is by Adrian Smith. We will talk about the building at length. This is a bad angle of the building. When we are out on Navy Pier, I will talk about it ad nauseum. But go next door, you're gonna see, of course, this is the Wrigley Building. The Wrigley Building is built in two parts. The northern tower is from 1923, the southern tower is from 1926. The space in between the two buildings was left for a potential railroad that never happened. The style is what we would call now a Spanish revivalist style building. So think about this, we didn't have architecture schools, we didn't have any of that stuff, so we basically build what we know. In this case, the clock face is from Seville, Spain. We just recreate Europe. Next door to that, you're gonna see the Chicago Tribune building. Now the base of that is Art Deco, but the crown is an homage to European cathedrals. On the sides, those are what we call flying buttresses. This is a low bridge, by the way, if you were upstairs. They buttress or support the crown. The crown of the Chicago Tribune building is actually an homage to Notre Dame. Colonel McCormick, who owned the Chicago Tribune at the time, wanted the most beautiful office building in the world. He made $100,000 for that design. He loved it, but the city of Chicago hated it. So much that they actually built a runner-up across the street. So if we go over to the NBC building right here, this is also by Adrian Smith, who did the Trump International. So the NBC building is really a tale of two cities. The side, so you've got flying buttresses on the Chicago building, the Tribune, and then you've got flying buttresses on the side of the NBC building. So flying buttresses here and flying buttresses there, by golly, we got them everywhere. The front of the building, however, that is supposed to be 30 Rock from New York. So that really building is two buildings in one. When they came up with this building back in the day, they thought they might have a new local Saturday Night Live. The best that we could do was actually just the Jerry Springer show. Coming across the river here, you're going to see a building that looks like the former World Trade Center. That's called Big Stan, or the Standard Oil Building. Today, that is the Aon Center. It's by Edward Durrell Stone and Associates. Next door, you can see, of course, the building that has the beautiful, curvy, wavy balconies is called Aqua. That, at one point, was the tallest building built in the world by a lead female architect. Sadly, she lost her crown to a local competitor. Every single balcony is unique. No two are the same. She used GPS mapping technology to create the curves of the balconies. Next door to that, there's a building by a guy by the name of Harry Weiss. We'll see more Harry Weiss a little bit later on in the ride when we go to the North Branch. So the bow of a ship breaking through the flat plain, you can see right there, Harry Weiss again. He's a postmodernist. Postmodern buildings largely, not always, but largely will have themes built in. So if you shook your eyes here to this beautiful new blue building, blue and white, that actually is called the St. Regis. That's the third tallest building in Chicago. On the 83rd and 84th floor up there, that is what we call a blow-through corridor. That allows the wind to whip through to keep the building nice and steady. Also on the top of the building is 450,000 gallons of water in tanks on tracks. They're called, of course, you have the idea is when the building sways more than 6 inches, which can go more than 6 inches, the water goes in the opposite direction. Slosh dampers, they're called. So big beveled concrete tracks. That building is also the tallest building in the world, built by a lead female architect who also happens to be Jeannie Gang. So she basically lost her crown to herself. That Centennial Fountain, that marks the 100th anniversary of the reversal of the flow of the Chicago River. We'll talk about that in just a moment as we head over to DuSable Drive, better known as Lakeshore Drive, or also known as Lakeshore Drive. The first person to ever go across that bridge was a fellow by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, better known as FDR, also known as FDR. He created one of the original highway systems in America because he understood how things flowed together. He was also he was the undersecretary of the Navy. Interestingly enough, his cousin, who was also president before him, Teddy Roosevelt, was undersecretary of the Navy. If you look over here on the left-hand side, you're going to see two buildings under construction. For years and years and years, I looked at this space as a big hole in the ground because it was to be the tallest building in the world at that time, known, or what was going to be known as the Chicago Spire. It was going to be huge. But the Great Recession happened and it expired. So you have two buildings now going under construction on this site. They will be called 450 Lakeshore Drive. Two buildings, big buildings, about 1,100 feet per building. So that's about 55 stories in a very small footprint. That's your, again, modern idea is bigger buildings, smaller footprints. Straight ahead, friends, should we want to invade Canada, this is how we would do it. I'm kidding. I'm joking. So that's called the water lock system, the Illinois lock system. So it's basically a water elevator. So when that opens up, you would go out onto it. The lake is about 5 feet higher than the river. If you look at the river, it's getting greener, almost blue. That's because we're close to our fresh drinking water. Lake Michigan is where we get our drinking water. Lake Michigan is 900 feet deep, 300 miles long, and about 100 miles wide, 150 actually. 21% of the world's clean drinking water are the Great Lakes combined. So that's pretty impressive. So over here you've got Navy Pier. That's the second most populous attraction in here in the state of Illinois. Number one is the Bean. Cloud Gate by Janusz Kapor gets about 13 million people. I think the foot traffic here is probably down. I think it's more like 9 million. But that's just a guess. The Ferris wheel, the world's first Ferris wheel, debuted in Chicago at the World's Fair of 1893. Now the Parisians had the World's Fair a few years before they debuted the beautiful Eiffel Tower. We screamed "Sacre bleu," we must do something. So this is what we did. So we created the Ferris wheel. The guy who came up with it, George Washington Ferris was his name, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but it was built in Chicago. Friends, we're going to turn the boat around. I'm going to give you a break from my nasal narrative. Downstairs, Raya's at the bar, my good friend Raya. Lovely young lady. She's a college student, so go down there, support her. Treat her well, tip her well. Great view of the city right now as the sun's kind of going down. Take as many photos as you like, and we'll come right back.
Şöyle durun.
Okay, and we're back. So we're going to go over to the North Branch now, and then we'll go south. But as promised, hello. Nice to see you. Like a curtain rising. It's a nice view of the city of Chicago. So as promised, that we're talking about the Trump International President's Building. The building itself is built back in 2007. The building itself is the second tallest building in the city of Chicago. It is what you would call a contextual building. The things that look like balconies are also called setbacks. So they match the height of the buildings around it. So the first one matches the height of the Wrigley building. The second one matches the height of a building that we'll look at called the Jewelers Building. The third one matches the height of the big boxy building behind it, which is also known as the AMA Plaza. The building itself has a spire on top of it, The president got into an argument with our former mayor, Mayor Daley, who wanted something more like the Sears Tower. He wanted a really big building. The president was like, okay, put a spire on top of it and said, now you got a big building. So he solved that one. Sheena Gang's building is actually physically taller. Again, spires count to the height of a building, an antenna does not. Which to me, I would think would be the opposite way, something that's functional, but hey, I don't make the rules. Over here on the left-hand side, going back to Mies van der Rohe's, not Mies van der Rohe's, his grandson, Dirk Lohan, designed this beautiful, lovely fountain. It is to celebrate the reversal of the flow of the Chicago River. Now, this river flows, doesn't go east, it actually goes west. So it runs backwards. So this is our Brooklyn Bridge, believe it or not. You can't really tell. Because back in the day, we actually would dump everything and anything into this river. Hog parts, blood, body parts, human waste. So that water, that human waste water would go out into Lake Michigan and we would drink it, yum yum, and die from cholera. So so there was an epidemic. About 1,500 people were dying annually from dysentery. So what they did was they recognized that the Mississippi River was lower than the Chicago River. So over the course of 11 years, and they dug 26 miles. So they made this river do a U-turn, and it flowed down to connect to the Mississippi. So it flowed, gravity took the river down, connected it to the Mississippi. And so no more poopy water. We sent all of that poopy water down to St. Louis. In revenge, they sent us Budweiser. Kidding, joking, oldest joke in the world. They did sue us 3 times. And we did pay off the first 2 judges. That is actually true. Coming over here on the right-hand side, you're gonna see a building with a yellow-shaped dome. That is a Moorish-style building, but if you look next to it, the thing that looks like a chimney was originally designed to be a blimp dock. They thought people back in the day, yes, we're gonna fly around in blimps, but this little thing called the Hindenburg happened. So, couldn't do that anymore. Can you imagine if like Toyota were designing blimps? The new 4x4. Anyway, beautiful shot of the city tonight, right? Boats, sun, and the promise of summer, where we won't have to wear these things anymore. Chicago's the only city in America with 5 seasons. Winter, spring, summer, fall, and what the heck is this? And today is kind of one of those, anyway, it's beautiful. So going back to the Wrigley building, William J. Wrigley did not invent chewing gum. He actually was a salesman. He would sell baking soda. He'd go door to door and sell it to you. But he went to the World's Fair and he discovered chewing gum, which debuted at the World's Fair of 1893. You're doing something right now. And at the end of every transaction, he'd hand you a stick of gum and say, ma'am, thank you so much for your business. But people like the gum more than they like the baking soda. So thus an empire was born. Now back then, Michigan Avenue was not called Michigan Avenue. It was called Pine Street. So this area where the Apple store is also known as Pioneer Plaza, because Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable had his trading post here. If you'd like to know more about Mr. de Sable, please visit the de Sable Museum in Bronzeville. Now, if you look at the Apple store here, every pane of glass is about 6 inches thick. Each pane of glass cost $1.5 million. Children waving must wave back. Children waving must wave back. So when they installed the corner here, they cracked it. Can you imagine saying to your boss, I just hit the gate, $1.6 million with your money. Hello. They got the Queens wave going. Low bridge, low bridge. This is a low bridge. Please watch your head. Kind of skanky looking, isn't it? So, okay. So, coming back to... So these bridges, if you want to do something kind of cool, you see the McCormick Bridge House? That's a bridge museum. That costs about $10. That will take you inside of that bridge house. These bridge houses go down about 5 stories. At the base of them are these huge gear systems. The gear systems are powered by little engines. Only 108 horsepower make that bridge go up and down. So it's the gears that are the real power behind that engineering. Look at the jeweler's building, second tier, boom, it's top of that. Sometimes people will ask me, do you do anything Al Capone related on the tour? The answer is yes and no. The top of that building was a speakeasy. It was not a speakeasy, but it was a bar called the Stratosphere Lounge. So if you don't know what a speakeasy is, it was an illegal bar during Prohibition. Al Capone did have one, just not there. He was actually in jail by the time that opened up. If you go to the Green Mill up on Lawrence, that's Al Capone's bar. If you're really nice to the bartender, he'll open the trap door behind the bar to show you where they used to run the booze into the city. And if you sit at the booth by the elbow in the bar, that's Al Capone's booth. So there you go. Over here, hello! She's very emphatic. So going to Mies van der Rohe's building on the right-hand side of the boat. So this is the largest and last building that Mies van der Rohe ever built. This is right here. Started in 1968, finished in 1973. Mies van der Rohe came out in his wheelchair to show them exactly where he wanted that corner anchor to go, so it would give you that really clean look. I'm not a big Miesian guy, but I do like that building. Next door to that, these are two buildings. These are called Marina City. Marina City are by Bertram Goldberg. Now some people call these the corn cobs. Don't do that. They're to be towers of flowers. Postmodernism. A postmodern building has a theme again, right? So this theme is flowers. The balconies are to be the petals of a flower inviting you inside. So at that time, people were fleeing for the suburbs. They said, and this was financed by a plumbers union. So they were basically using their own money to pay themselves. Also, they laundered some dirty money through the mob. So this building is one of the only buildings in Chicago history to have its own marina, ice skating rink, bowling alley, and movie theater in it. Today the movie theater is the House of Blues, the ice skating rink is gone, but the bowling alley remains called 10 Pins. Each one of these is very groovy. It's like living in a piece of pie. Circular at the front, pointed at the back. Very Austin Powers. It's been used in movies, The Hunter from Steve McQueen, album covers, the Yankee Foxtrot Hotel for Wilco, and of course the Far Superior. There's a riot going on from Sly and the Family Stone. We're going up under the bridge here, friends. Brave as we must be. We're gonna go over here to the left-hand side of the boat. We're going to go to 77 Whacker. 77 Whacker is by Jim DeStefano and the late, great Spanish genius Ricardo Bofill from Barcelona. The building itself is a neo-classic, I would say, style. So if you look at the glass reflects the sky around it. The Roman columns take you up to the pediment at the top of the building, which runs in a 360. We have two buildings in Chicago by Ricardo Bofill. The other one is called the Citadel, which I think is I kind of like the design of the Citadel a little bit more. That is really not a great representation of Ricardo Bofill's work. He really was a genius. They wanted something very anglicized, I think. The lights on this building light up at night, making it really, really beautiful. Chicago is spending a lot of money in uplighting in a lot of buildings, as are lots of cities across the United States. Oh, the little baby's so cute. Hello. Hello, little baby. Hello, guys. Hello. So over here on the right-hand side of the boat is the Reed Murdoch building. The Reed Murdoch building is the only example of what we call prairie-style architecture on our rise map. So you might be familiar with the name Frank Lloyd Wright. When we say prairie-style, this is not a Frank Lloyd Wright building. It's George Nimitz. I swear I'm awake. He does that to make sure that I'm still awake. So this is was a cold storage facility. It was also a morgue for a minute, because where you are right now, the worst nautical disaster in American history actually happened. It is called of course, there was a boat, it was a wreck boat, it capsized, and it killed about 800 people almost instantly, and that was the morgue where they housed the bodies, because it was a cold storage facility. You can also note that it's 5 columns going right, 4 columns going left. They sliced off part of the building back in the day to expand the South Street. Coming up over here on the right-hand side of the boat, you're going to see, of course, a building that says the Chicago School. Now, That is the Chicago School of Psychology today, but the style of building is called the Chicago School of Architecture. That means it's a simple steel-framed building with tripartite columns. Tripartite means base, shaft, capital. The flute's in the middle, the capital's on top, or the crown. Now, think about this. From the time of the pyramids, large stone load-bearing walls. The thicker the base, the higher the building. Bless you, sir. Now then, steel comes into play and reinvents everything. So from the time of the Egyptians and pyramids to steel, which is about 1871, nothing changes. And then boom, a huge evolution in architecture. Coming back to the merchandise mart briefly, these green heads, people ask me all the time, what are those? Some people call it the Pez Dispenser Hall of Fame. That's actually Captain Joe's joke. I call it fleshy-headed white guys in search of purpose. These are the merchant princes, established in 1958 by Joe Kennedy, who then owned the building. What's more impressive, though, is the interior of the building. It's beautiful inside. There are some wonderful mosaics. The mosaics are of trade from around the world. They are done by a gentleman by the name of Jules Guskin. Jules Guskin was a very famous muralist that was used by Graham Anderson Probst the White. He also did the We the People in DC, the big W. When you go inside of that, he's the gentleman that also did that. Now take a look there. That's what we call the trophy case. Straight ahead, we call that the Hot Pocket building for pretty obvious reasons. I had a lady recently come and say, why is it the Hot Pocket? I said, darling, look again. And she went, it's a Hot Pocket. I said, I would never have guessed. Next door to that, that is of course 150 North Riverside Plaza. That building itself we'll talk about at length as we go south, but they also call that the Tuning Fork building. Now, this area here, if you look where the Holiday Inn, where I'm pointing, I used to send people into that building for a nice drink or a meal after the ride because they could see all of Chicago. Can't do that anymore. Chicago does not honor something called viewing rights. So if you build a beautiful apartment, sometimes your view will get obscured by somebody else. In this case, this is Wolf Point East. Now this is now called the Salesforce Tower. This would have been Wolf Point South. On the other side, you're going to see Wolf Point West. These three buildings are new. They have pretty small footprints, but they go up about 55 stories. Now, 55 stories tall, not super big, but when you look at the footprint themselves, it's pretty impressive. So each one of these footprints is about 18 tractor trailers side by side by side. Now, Chicago is a marsh. The bedrock is clay. You actually have to go down 120 feet until you actually get to stone. So then when you pour what are called caissons, those are large pillars of cement with rebar steel in the middle. We're going to see kind of an example of that, which is kind of cool, is to see where the new casino's coming from. Go to the red brick building, if you will. That is called Fulton House. That's the oldest building on the river. Not the oldest building in Chicago, but the oldest building on the river. That was originally what's called a cold storage facility. So just like we saw where the Eastland disaster happened, that was a cold storage facility for produce. This was a cold storage facility for meat. So if you've ever read a book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, you've read about unions and slaughterhouses. That happened on the south side of the place called the back of the yards. They would bring meat via rail and store it in that building. So about 100, now remember, the river is a sewer at that time. It doesn't really get cleaned up until the 70s. So in the late 80s, early 90s, a guy by the name of Harry Weiss looks at that building, and it's still kind of stinky down here at that time. And he says, you know what? I think I want to turn that into an apartment building. Everybody goes, you are bananas. But he says, I'm going to do it anyway. So what he does is he punches holes in the walls. Now, back in the Stone Age, you didn't have refrigeration coils. So how'd you keep things cold? Horsehair and cork. I never would have thought of it. They wove that into the walls of the building to keep the cold in. Now, it worked so well, this building took 3 months to thaw, almost 100 years later. So that becomes Fulton House, the first building on the river to change everything around it. See, we say, I dissent, I disagree, I have a different idea. And people don't always agree with you, but look what happens as a result of thinking differently. Next door to that, you're gonna see these are called the river cottages. Now they embrace the three shapes that architects really like to use. Circles, triangles, squares. The circles are the portals, the triangle is the bow of a ship, the rectangles or the squares are the masts. So circles, triangles, and squares. Oh my. These originally went on the market for $350,000 a piece. This one right here won the market. This is the low bridge, by the way, for about $2.4 million just a few years ago. By the way, the circles, triangles, and squares will be on the quiz at the end of the ride. So when we think different, we look here at, of course, the East Bank Club. The East Bank Club is a fancy pants tennis club. Now that was built back a little bit before, of course, the river cottages. They do not face the river. They said, we don't want to be on the Stinky River. Now, Harry Weiss says, I think you want to be on the Stinky River. And he's right, because look, boom, what happens? People build on the river eventually. These are called the Kinsey Street townhomes. They go on the market. They're about 4,500 square feet per unit. They're $2.8, $2.9 million a piece. The best I can afford to do is like maybe walk down here. But everybody's got to have a dream. Now we're going to go a bit further north. Now back in the day, there was this fellow by the name of Montgomery Ward that you may have heard of or may not have heard of. He was a salesman from New Jersey. He came to Chicago. He started selling things door to door. Knock, knock, knock. You want some stuff? Great, I'll give it to you. You need some stuff? I'll give it to you. Then he had an idea. Wait, you needed stuff and you needed stuff. What if I put it in a book and I mail it to you? That became what was called a catalog. So think Amazon. When you buy stuff on Amazon, that's just a catalog, except it's digital. He did it analog. So that became the beginning of what was called the catalog business. Chicago is home to the world's largest catalog business, again, Printers Row. So we're gonna see what's called a fulfillment campus. So in your neighborhood, you see Amazon trucks all the time, right? So they come from fulfillment campuses. You're going to see the world's first fulfillment campus in just a few minutes. Over here on the left-hand side, though, I'm going to show you something. This is called Freedom, or was called Freedom Plaza. This is 30 acres. So from Grand Avenue Bridge all the way down to the point in the river is 30 acres. That was home to the Chicago Tribune. Now, to prove to you the print is dead, the last copy, physical copy, printed in Chicago of the Chicago Tribune, printed last year, June 30th. Now, they still make the Chicago Tribune. It just happens to be published and printed out in the suburbs, Highland Park. Now, this, of course, is going to be the brand new by Bally's, about a $300 million project. But look straight ahead where that scaffolding is on the right-hand side. So that was the first building of the Montgomery Ward campus. They've taken off Diana. There's a little statue of a lady like this, Diana, the goddess of progress. But if you go next door to that beautiful mid-century building, which I'm going to call it mid-century, not postmodern, blue windows and the white. That was by a gentleman by the name of Miro Fukuzawa. He designed the former World Trade Center in New York City. Beautiful building. That was the last building of the Montgomery Ward campus. So back then they would say, hey, we're running out of space, what do we do? He'd say, just build another building. Montgomery Ward ceased being Montgomery Ward in the year 2000. I think they're still around. They have a catalog business, but just not the same. Not unlike Sears, Roebuck, or JCPenney have gone the way of the dodo. Now, people ask me all the time, hey, what do you bring up and down on the Chicago River anymore? My answer is always the same, nothing. We bring up and down the river. We used to bring wood, steel, salt, concrete, anything and everything. This was a shipping superhighway. Why? Because if we went further south, and I kept talking for about 3 weeks, it's possible. We would end up in the Gulf of Mexico because this river connects to the Mississippi River. So when the Mississippi River connects to Lake Michigan, boom, money, money, money. Because you go into Canada, you go into New York. So that became, think of like going around Cape Horn. That's why they created the Panama Canal. When you had this, no need. You could just simply come into Chicago, put it on a train, and distribute it to the rest of the nation. Straight ahead, you're going to see that building is the first building of the Montgomery Ward campus. That's by a fellow by the name of Richard E. Schmidt. It's 250,000 square feet of reinforced steel and concrete. It is also a prairie-style building. But look over here. If you look on the left-hand side of the boat, you can move around. So I was going to see the steel cages. See, if you look at that blue crane right there, that drives caissons into the ground. And if you look in front of it, the sun's kind of blocking it, but you'll see these round steel cages. That rebar steel is the center of that caisson that gets sunk into the ground. So they go down 120 feet to get to that bedrock. Bang, bang, bang. It'll start going, it'll drive that caisson until it hits that bedrock. And that's when they begin to create that project. It's going to be really cool. It's going to transform the whole area over here. It's going to have a lakefront, it's going to have the docks, it's going to have an amphitheater, it's going to have gambling. If you need to get your gamble on while you're here, we also do have Bally's Casino, which is in the former Bloomingdale's building. We also do have Rivers Casino out Des Plaines, which is actually pretty nice. The state and Chicago battled for a long time for gambling rights. And we finally, I think like 5 permits were granted for Chicago and the surrounding areas. Rivers Casino bought 2 of them. They bought one and they just tore it up, saying, no competition, thank you. They were pretty smart. I thought that was strategic. Straight ahead, friends, where that boat was going, we're going to go attack them. No, I'm kidding. We're going to turn around. That area was called Hell's Kitchen. I know there's a Hell's Kitchen in New York, but this was a Hell's Kitchen for Irish immigrants during the Chicago Fire. So the Chicago Fire was 4.5 miles, 18,500 buildings, 300,000 people homeless in 2.5 days. But we'll talk about that at length. I'm going to step off the mic briefly, come around and say hello, see if you have any questions about anything that we've seen or anything we're going to see. Downstairs, America's favorite college student, Raya's at the bar. Go down, visit her, get a drink, treat her well, tip her well. Friends, we're going to come right back. You look right here, train tracks here, and then if you look over underneath the bridge, you'll see a fence, train tracks there. Those train tracks run all the way over to Nehri Pier, where you just were just a couple minutes ago. So that's one of the oldest bridges in Chicago. People ask me all the time, why do you still have it? My answer is always the same, because it's cool. And it's romantic, which I like. So anyway, and then we do have trains. If you look at the bridge right there, on top of it, those are train tracks. So we have something called the L, which also goes underground, but it's called the elevated train. That's why it's called the L. The trains also loop around downtown. They do a U, but that's not why it's called the loop. It's called the loop because the train tracks on the south part of the city used to cross over each other. They would loop over each other, which is why it's called the loop. Now, 150 North Riverside Plaza, that we were talking about earlier. So the base of that building where the gray part is, that's 39.5 feet. So 55 stories are anchored. See, there's the train. Iconic photo right there if you're looking for one. 55 stories are anchored in 39 feet. So that building is built with what's called G5 steel. That's the toughest steel in the world. Comes from Luxembourg. Now, people ask me, so also at the top of the building are also slosh dampers. That's 150,000 gallons of water in tanks on tracks. Just like you saw Jeannie Gang's building is almost 500,000. This is only
Normally,
150,000.
they build
So again, when the building goes this way, the water goes that way, pulling the building steady. The building itself, each column, by the way, low bridge, low bridge, low bridge. So each column can support 4 locomotives. So all told, that's 13 million pounds of pressure can be support on this building. Plus, it's a little dark right now, but you can say hello to yourselves. Hello, selves. The best looking people on this boat. If you look up, you can see how it's kind of cantilevering like this. Not cantilevering, excuse me, flowing like that. That's for water. Again, that's contextualism. So if you look across the river, you can see that's the Bank of America Tower. Both are twinsies, sisters. This was built during the pandemic, 2017. This one, 2020, it was completed. Maybe a little bit. 21. So this one is to be for buildings, that one is to be for the river. Buildings and river, again, contextualism. Coming up over here on the right-hand side of the boat, the Boeing building. Now, we're going to go to the Summer George School of Design. This is a postmodern themed building, meaning it had supposed to look like something, right? So this was originally home to the Morton Salt Company. So if you look up, you'll see circles. So if that's the salt company, and those are circles, what's it supposed to look like? Salt shaker, that's right. Congratulations, you're all architects. It's not that easy. But I like it to be that easy. Okay, over here, stand on the right-hand side, 150 North Riverside Plaza. Again, Art Deco is the style. It's by Halliburton and Root. This has a setback, now away from the river. Now, I told you before, a setback was because of height. This is a setback because of weight. They thought it was going to be too heavy to go on the train tracks, and it would crush the train tracks below it. So they give it a setback. Now, at the time, again, this was a stinky, smelly sewer. And what they were originally going to do, they were going to broadcast movies from here onto there. You might also note that it says Civic Opera Building. The V and the U are the same characters in the Latin and English alphabet. So if you wanted to be very fancy back then in culture, they would put building on some of those buildings just to give it an air, a little flash. It's also a beautiful building inside. So we're going to come back over to the Futurama Johnson's beautiful building, the Mercantile Exchange. The Mercantile Exchange itself, again, these two towers couldn't be perpendicular in the original renderings. So how did they solve it? Good old-fashioned arithmetic. They put more weight on the trading floor, pulling the two towers plumb. So that keeps it nice and even. Going over to the Hartford building, which is right next door. Don't know a whole lot about who actually started the Hartford building, except for the fact that I always thought it was kind of cool because it had the exoskeleton on the outside of the building rather than the inside of the building. And that was around the time that modernism, postmodernism started to kind of blend. Going over to the Sears Tower for a second. Now, if you look again, those big antennas do not count to the height of the building, but 1,451 feet is pretty tall. So how did they calculate that? Well, they had a fulfillment station, just like you saw with Montgomery Ward, except their version was down in Lisle. That's where they took all of their employees and put them in one giant building. WGN Radio started there. Lots of different things. But Fazla Khan, who was the engineer of that building, could not figure out how to make something so tall until he was having a cigarette. And he looked at the cigarette and he saw the circle. And the insight that he had was to say something called bundle tube architecture. This building is a giant square. It's lots of bundled tubes at the base. One big tube, smaller tubes inside become the base of the building. Also, Adams Street is the origin point of Route 66, America's first highway system. It goes from Michigan Avenue all the way far west as Santa Monica, California, then actually doubles back and ends right there at Jackson Boulevard. So after the boat ride, you could say you've taken a really long road trip or a very short one. The choice is yours. Now, friends, at this point in the ride, you're probably having an existential crisis because of the sound of my voice. Fear not. Monday through Friday, I am an actual psychotherapist, believe it or not. So Monday through Friday, I listen to everybody, but on Sunday, you listen to me. So if you're are having that problem right now, remember where you are. You're right here with me on this boat. You are literally right here. The red dot is where you are right now. So that is actually a map of the Chicago River. See the Y all the way up there? You were just there. Now you're where the red dot is. That's one of the largest outdoor art installations in North America. They wanted to literally, yes, I'm going to say it, get back on. So we're going to go further south now. We're going to see, of course, lots of things where the Great Chicago Fire started and much, much more. We're going to see some new construction. We're going to see a brand new neighborhood. We're going to talk about the Great Chicago Fire. And then we're going to go for a climactic view of our beautiful city down to Chinatown. So don't worry, I know it's getting a little chilly, but just bear with it just a little bit longer. That view is going to be worth it, I promise you. Over here on the left-hand side, this is called the Centrino building. At night, when these buildings power down, this powers up to create 500,000 pounds of ice per day. That ice will melt throughout the day, helping to keep the South Branch, not the river, but all of these buildings nice and cool during the day. Yeah. So also again, if it's a gray bridge, it's a federal bridge. If it's a brown bridge, it's Chicago. So we're gonna two buildings that we'll talk about in just a second. When I started doing this, the old post office was still empty. None of these buildings existed. But now, lots of buildings, lots of new buildings. The Reed's a new building. The buildings here. Now this was originally one of Chicago's original rail stations. The Coopertown Apartments. But the two buildings that I'll talk about next, straight ahead as soon as we clear the Harrison Street Bridge, you're going to see two smokestacks. Now that was originally a coal-fired power plant. So the two forms of energy that Illinois uses the most, nukes and coal. Still, coal is number 2. But that would have been pumping and dumping black air into the sky here. So even in the 1950s, the air here would have dark with ash and soot. Not a pretty picture. You can see how beautiful it is, but we were still kind of that industrial city. So we shut that down. People ask me all the time, are they going to do anything with that building? The answer is no, they can't do anything with the building because it's got lots of asbestos and coal dust. It would be just an environmental nightmare. So they're kind of trying to figure out what to do. The building next to it, that is where you got on our boat tonight, is called River City. Look a little bit further south, you'll see another bubble tower. So bubble building here, bubble building there. Both are by Bertram Goldberg, who did the flower towers that we saw earlier. So that was a red light district. They cleaned that up. He put those down. Those are called the Hilliards. This, if you look at it, suddenly kind of stops because it was going to be a giant S. It actually is a giant S. It's a big snake. It's going to go all the way down to the Harrison Street Bridge, all the way down to the Roosevelt Street Bridge. It's going to be 40 stories tall and was going to be threaded together by small bridges. People could run like deer. No. But this was going to be, Bertram Goldberg loved creating cities within cities. The idea was he wanted you to not have a long commute. But the city did not agree with him, saying that this would be a crime hub. And actually at the time in the 1990s, it was. It's been cleaned up a lot, much, much safer and better today. As we head further south, let's go over here to the right-hand side of the boat to an electrical grid that literally has no architectural value whatsoever. But if you go to the other side of it though, there is the Chicago Firefighting Academy. That's where we train the firefighters. It's also the origin point of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. So we trained the firefighters on the site where we burned the city to the ground. So you gotta give at least credit for us to having a sense of humor about the whole thing. So back in 1871, there was a barn in that area. So this was all farms. It was owned by a lady by the name of Catherine O'Leary. So think two things. One, 1871, October 8th, about 8:30 at night. So it's just getting dark around that time. Still really warm in Chicago. Indian summer's happening. 18,500 buildings are wood, mostly. We deforest. Wisconsin, Indiana, we clear cut. You can still see that today. Now, in this barn, there's a cow named Daisy. Daisy does not like the heat. She's walking back and forth thinking, I cannot take this anymore. Poor thing lifts up her leg, knocks over a lantern. The lantern is, of course, kerosene. It spits flame onto the wall to the roof. The city of Chicago is ablaze. We burn for 2.5 days. In that time, 300 people die. 100,000 people out of a 300,000 person population are homeless overnight. 1/3 of the city's population, and 18,500 buildings burned to the ground. It's so crazy that night that the fire department originally goes to the wrong house. Now, everything I told you about that story is 100%-ish true. With the exception is there's no cow. There was no cow, there was a Mrs. O'Leary, there was no Daisy. That was created by newspaper reporters to sell headlines. So yes, I'm gonna say it, it was a cowspiracy. I had to, I'm sorry. Now, what happened to Mrs. O'Leary? Don't worry about her. Her son was a guy by the name of Big Jim O'Leary. He became one of Chicago's most notorious gangsters at that time and built his mother a mansion down in Englewood, which is still there. It's called the O'Leary Mansion. And Mrs. O'Leary's name is finally cleared by the city of Chicago only 100 years later. So there you go. But people ask, why did we rebuild a city? So Chicago is called the second city, not because it's the second to New York. It's called the second city because it's the second version of the first one. So that's why you see this is the second city. And they used steel the second time. Plus, you could build an entire city from scratch. So there you go. This is called the 78. This is the 78th neighborhood here in the city of Chicago. Chicago has 77 neighborhoods: Uptown, Downtown, Bucktown, Chinatown, Englewood, all those different Pilsen. And this will be the 78th. A completely self-contained neighborhood. $20 billion with a B dollars are going to go into this from a company called Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. They designed the Sears Tower. They designed lots of other buildings in the city of Chicago. But they're designing this neighborhood. Now, for years, this was nothing. It was going to be something called Silicon on the Prairie, which eventually that was financed by then candidate, now Governor J.B. Pritzker. It was going to be lots and lots of different things. We're going down to Chinatown, the South Side, home to many things. The White Sox, of course. They're even talking about building White Sox Stadium over here. I don't think that's going to happen with their record, but hey. And plus, like, where are you going to have people park if it's a neighborhood? Anyway, I like the Guaranteed Rate Field. I still like Comiskey. I don't know why they tore it down in the first place, but that makes me old. Anyway, going further down into Chinatown, South Side, home to many things. The University of Chicago, improvisational theater, actually born at the University of Chicago and split in half. Also down here, of course, Chinatown, that we're going to see a little bit of in just a minute. And if you want to go over to what's called Cadillac Row, you can see Chess Records. Back in the day, every city would have had its own sound. The Motown sound of Detroit, of course. Memphis had Sun Records, but across town there was something called Stax Volts Records, which was even better and hipper and awesome. Great story. Really cool story. There's a great mini-series on HBO, or docu-series, I guess they call it now, about Stax Volts Records. The irony there is the band that backed people like Booker T and the MGs and Carla and Rufus and Otis Redding become the band of the Blues Brothers. So it's like all kind of connected. Anyway, I like history. Can you tell? Coming down here to Chinatown, this of course is Ping Tom Park. Ping Tom was a city alderman here in Chicago. Chicago has dedicated about 4,000 acres to parks in Chicago. So we're really about our green spaces, even when we design the city. The Burnham Plan is the Chicago Plan, which of course was, hello, you guys are adventuresome, doing some urban climbing, I like that. People come down here to Ping Tom Park, all kinds of cool things. A cool Instagram channel, if you're not hip to it, is called Secret Chicago. They show you where lots of pop-up stuff happens in the city, like concerts, all kinds of cool stuff. Lots of great improv places in the city, like Logan Square Improv, better known as LSI. You can go over to Second City, which is okay. But if you want to know where the route is, I think Logan Square LSI is it. That's where it's happening. And the Lincoln Lodge for stand-up comedy. Lots of cool things you can do in Chicago for not a lot of money. That's what I also love about Chicago. People come down here for quinceañeras, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. See, the thing I also love about Chicago is if you see spray paint anywhere, you can call 311. They will come out and they will scrub it clean. We used to actually have this thing called graffiti busters, which is not happening right now. See a kid tap dancing. He's enjoying Chicago. He's so excited to be here, he's actually tap dancing. Chinatown is one of the only neighborhoods in Chicago that has not gentrified. It has retained its ethnic roots and deepened them. If you want some good dim sum and then some, I would recommend Furama. It's down here on the south side. I'd also recommend, of course, Furama up on the north side. Some gentlemen enjoying their Labor Day weekend. Sorry, Memorial Day weekend. I'm jumping ahead. And those kids, look at there. I'm loving that. Hello. Woo. That's it.
How did you get there?
And weddings and taxi rides, all kinds of cool stuff happening down here in Big Town Park. Now, the last bridge that we're going to look at is called a lift bridge. So swing bridges would go in a 360, double leaf bascule up and down in two parts. This goes up and down in one part. Look at the two towers. Concrete, 4.5 tons on each tower with chains that weigh over a ton. Pull down. The center part of the bridge goes up. It's still functional. It's over 100 years old. Great engineering. On top of that is a bridge house. I had a young man ask me recently if that was for sale. I said, no, that's my condo. But no, it's actually nobody lives there. Anyway, friends, we're going to turn the boat around. Once we clear the 18th Avenue Bridge, that's the best view of Chicago in Chicago. Take as many photos as you want. I'm going to be silent off the mic. If you want to ask me questions, please do. If you want to close out your tab with Raya downstairs, America's favorite college student, take care of her. Don't forget to take off the boat what you brought on the boat. Your cell phones, your keys, your wallet, your children. If they stay behind, they become employees. My first ride was in like 85. It hasn't been fun. Anyway, we'll come back in about 5 minutes, okay? Enjoy the ride. So people would have sat in there 24-hour shifts, and so as big barges would come up and down the river. I've been doing this for a decade. I've never stopped. And then like last year, I came down and it was working. I was like, oh my God, I'm now happy. But it's cool. If you go down to like further down the river, you'll see those swing bridges. So they would go at a 360. They're pretty cool too. But I think the lift There's your beautiful view. Fire at will.